Indriyani tasya pragya pratishtita. Translation.
One who restrains his senses and fixes his consciousness upon me is known as a man of steady intelligence.
62. Jayato vishayan pungsa sangasteshu pajayate sangat sanjayate kama kamat krodho vijayate. Translation. While
contemplating the objects of the senses, a person develops attachment for them, and from such attachment lust develops, and from lust anger arises.
63. Krodhat bhavati sammoha, sammohat smriti vibramaha, smriti bramshat buddhinasho, buddhinashat pranashyati. Translation.
From anger, delusion arises, and from delusion, bewilderment of memory. When memory is bewildered, intelligence is lost, and when intelligence is lost, one falls down again into the material pool.
Next 64. Raga dvesha vimuktaistu vishayan indriyaischaran atmavashya vidhe atma prasabam nudiyachati. Translation. One who can control his senses
by practicing the regulated principles of freedom can obtain the complete mercy of the Lord and thus become free from all attachment and aversion.
Take 65. Prasade sarvadukhanam hanirasyo pajayate prasanna chetaso yashu buddhi samyatishtate. Translation. For one who is so situated
in the divine consciousness, the threefold miseries of material existence exist no longer. In such a happy state, one's intelligence soon becomes steady.
Take 66. Nasti buddhira yuktasya nacha yuktasya bhavana nacha bhavayata shantir ashantasya kuta sukham. Translation.
One who is not in transcendental consciousness can have neither a controlled mind nor steady intelligence, without which there is no possibility of peace. And how can there be any happiness without peace?
Text 67. Indriyani charatam yamano nuvidhiyate tarasya harati pragyam ayurnaram mivambasi. Translation. As a boat on the water
is swept away by a strong wind, even one of the senses on which the mind focuses can carry away a man's intelligence.
68. Tasmad yasya mahabhaho nigrihitani sarvashaha indriyan indriyartebhyas tasya pragya pratishtita. Translation. Therefore, Almighty
Armed, one whose senses are restrained from their objects is certainly of steady intelligence.
This will be the final one. 69. Yanisha sarva bhutana tasyam jagarti samyami yasyam jagrati bhutani sa nisha pashato munehe. Translation. What is night for all beings
is the time of awakening for the self-controlled, and the time of awakening for all beings is night for the introspective sage.
Back to text 59. Can you read the purport?
Translation.
Okay.
We do the translation.
Okay.
So Chapter 2, Text 59, translation. The embodied soul may be restricted from sense enjoyment, though the taste of sense object remains. But seizing such engagements by experiencing a higher taste, he is fixed in consciousness. Purport. Unless one is transcendently situated, it is not possible to seize a sense enjoyment. The process of restriction from sense enjoyment by rules and regulations is something like restricting a diseased person from certain types of eatables. The patient, however, neither likes such restrictions nor loses his taste for eatables. Similarly, sense restriction by some spiritual process like Ashtanga yoga in the matter of yama, niyama, asana, pranayama, pratyahara, dharana, dhyana, etc., is recommended for less intelligent persons who have no better knowledge. But one who has tasted the beauty of the Supreme Lord Krishna, in the course of his advancement in Krishna consciousness, no longer has a taste for dead material things. Therefore, restrictions are there for the less intelligent neophytes in the spiritual advancement of life. But such restrictions are only good if one actually has a taste for Krishna consciousness. When one is actually Krishna conscious, he automatically loses his taste for pale things.
Yes. People try to learn how to avoid getting angry. They like to learn how to avoid reacting instead of responding. They feel they're acting on the false ego platform. They like to learn how to stop smoking. There's so many habits that people have that they would like to get rid of. Get free from anxiety, get peace of mind, sleep better, eat better, be healthier. So many things. All these things are automatically included as side benefits of Krishna consciousness. That's why it's the umbrella principle, the program that serves all those purposes. There's a verse in the same chapter that the river serves all the purposes of the pond, or the small pond, or the well. The well can serve some purposes, give some water, give a little, some plants, but the river takes so much more. So similarly, Krishna consciousness, if employed, if practiced, takes care of all these things like health and getting free from unwanted desires, curbing down lust. Begins with lust. So if lust is curbed, then we won't have to worry about anger, getting and falling down and giving up intelligence, acting in a very strange way, getting intoxicated. These things are products of the mode of ignorance and passion. And Krishna consciousness is not only goodness, but it's pure goodness, Shuddha Sattva. So it's above goodness. It's transcendental. You can't even put a label on it. It's divine. It's the spiritual world. So how is it that the soul, the living entity, has come into this world if he's spiritual by nature? He's part and parcel of God, that's a fact, and he's all spiritual. But he has the independence, free will. And if he misuses it, if he chooses to try to enjoy matter, which is not his environment. It's like a fish who has free will. If he jumps out of the ocean and stays on the shore, he's doomed because he's gone out of his natural habitat into one that's foreign and not suited for him. This material world is not suited for the living entity who's pure spiritual. But there is a way to recuperate from this diseased state, and that is bhakti yoga or Krishna consciousness. And then one doesn't have to pays so much in medicine and so many different things to try to recoup his health, because his natural health is to be eternal, full of knowledge and full of bliss. If he's eternal, there's no diseases. The disease is only when he acts against the instructions of Krishna, then he becomes overwhelmed. So this is the main point here. And the embodied soul may be restricted from sense enjoyment, though the sense objects still remain. So forced restriction, it can work for temporary, but still the patient, he doesn't lose a taste for those things. He still wants them, even though he's not able to do them. But in Krishna consciousness, one loses taste for pale things. He's not interested in, even if he could have it, even if he has the opportunity, he's not interested. That's amazing. People can't understand how it's possible. How could someone give up something that they used to like so much? What has it changed? So sometimes people are bewildered and they think it's brainwashing, or he's somehow or other lost his mind, or he's under the effect of some drug or something. But actually, he's becoming free from the disease of Maya, of material energy. And now he's awakening to his real consciousness, which is pure Krishna consciousness, acting without false ego, without lust, without greed, without anger, without anxiety, and living like that, not eating more than required, not sleep. Naturally, he'll do these things. A yogi, it's like Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, that the yogi is nidraha, yukta harasya, yukta swapnasya bodhi, yukta swapna bodhasya, yogo bhavati dukkha. One who's temperate in his habits of eating, sleeping, mating, and defending, he automatically can practice yoga. Otherwise, if he's not moderate, then he cannot. To Magadari, back to you.
Text 60. The senses are so strong and impetuous, O Arjuna, that they forcibly carry away the mind even of a man of discrimination who is endeavoring to control them. Purport. There are many learned sages, philosophers, and transcendentalists who try to conquer the senses, but in spite of their endeavors, even the greatest of them sometimes fall victim to material sense enjoyment due to the agitated mind. Even Vishvamitra, a great sage and perfect yogi, was misled by Menika into sex enjoyment, although the yogi was endeavoring for sense control with severe types of penance and yoga practice. And of course, there are so many similar instances in the history of the world. Therefore, it is difficult to control the mind and the senses without being fully Krishna conscious. Without engaging the mind in Krishna, one cannot cease such material engagements. A practical example is given by Sri Yamuna Acharya, a great saint and devotee, who says, since my mind has been engaged in the service of the lotus feet of Lord Krishna, and I have been enjoying an ever new transcendental humor, whenever I think of sex life with a woman, my face at once turns from it, and I spit at the thought. Krishna consciousness is such a transcendentally nice thing that automatically material enjoyment becomes distasteful. It is as if a hungry man had satisfied his hunger by a sufficient quantity of nutritious eatables. Maharaj Ambarisha also conquered a great yogi, Durvasa Muni, simply because his mind was engaged in Krishna consciousness. So this is a pretty amazing verse here. This is, in addition to what Krishna just said about having the higher taste, we are practiced by many, many millions of years to seek pleasure through the senses, and we are drawn by this type of enjoyment. And even if we try to control our senses, if we're not fully Krishna conscious, then we won't be able to very successfully. And there's a great sage, Vishwamitra, and he was enticed by Menaka, who is a wonderfully beautiful heavenly personality, and Vishwamitra was enticed into sex enjoyment, even though he was a yogi who was by force and by practice restraining himself from sense pleasure. So Sri Yamunacharya is a great saint, and he's describing that, just as Krishna described in text 59, when I'm experiencing what's called Nava Rasa, ever new transcendental humor by service to Krishna, then that pleasure, which is the sense objects contacting the senses without touch of Krishna consciousness, or without the Lord's service, that type of sense pleasure is disturbing for Sri Yamunacharya. And Yamunacharya, it was actually a great king. So it was possible for him to enjoy sense pleasure, particularly with women, in a way which is on a very high level compared to the normal person. And even though he had great facilities for that type of pleasure, he doesn't think it's very much attractive. So, yes. Prabhupada also mentions that the yogi, Durvasa Muni, was conquered by Maharaj Ambarish. And this is because Maharaj Ambarish is always engaged in Krishna's service. So this is just another statement that the bhakti yogi, or the devotee of Krishna, is in every way superior to the yogi who is endeavoring to control his senses without Krishna consciousness. Okay. So, text 61. One who restrains his senses and fixes his consciousness upon me is known as a man of steady intelligence. Purport. That the highest Jagannath.
That the highest conception of yoga perfection is Krishna consciousness is clearly explained in this verse. And unless one is Krishna conscious, it is not at all possible to control the senses. As cited above, the great sage Durvasa Muni picked a quarrel with Maharaj Ambarish and Durvasa Muni unnecessarily became angry out of pride and therefore could not check his senses. On the other hand, the king, although not as powerful a yogi as the sage, but a devotee of the Lord, silently tolerated all the sages' injustices and thereby emerged victorious. The king was able to control his senses because of the following qualifications, as mentioned in the Srimad Bhagavatam. Savai Mano Krishna Parada Vindaya Vachansi Vaikunta Guna Garo Hare Mandira Marjana Dishu Shrutim Chakara Chuti
Satkato Daye.
Mukunda Vijaya Krishna Trisho Tadvritya Gatra Spashinga Sadhamam Granam Chantat Sada Saroja Saurabhe Srimatudasya Prasannatarpite Padore Chitra Pradhan Sarpane Shiro Rishikesha Padabhivandane Kamam Chantasya Satukamakamaya Yato Nashloka Janashayati. King Ambarish fixed his mind on the lotus feet of Lord Krishna, engaged his words in describing the abode of the Lord, his hands in cleansing the temple of the Lord, his ears in hearing the pastimes of the Lord, his eyes in seeing the form of the Lord, his body in touching the body of the Lord, his smelling the flower of the flower, in smelling the flavor of the flowers offered to the lotus feet of the Lord, his tongue in tasting the tulasi leaf offered to tulasi leaves offered to him, his legs in traveling to the holy place where his temple is situated, his head in offering obeisances unto the Lord, and his desires in fulfilling the desires of the Lord. And all these qualifications made him fit to become a Matpara devotee of the Lord. The word Matparaha is most significant in this connection. How one can become a Matparaha is described in the life of Maharaj Ambarish. Srila Baladev Vidyabhushana, a great scholar and acharya in the line of the Matpara, remarks, Madbhakti Prabhavana Savindriya Vijaya Purvika Swatma Drishti Sulabdheti Bhavaha. The senses can be completely controlled only by the strength of devotional service to Krishna. Also, the example of fire is sometimes given. As the small flames within burn everything within the room, similarly, Lord Vishnu, situated in the heart of the yogi, burns up all kinds of impurities. The Yoga Sutra also prescribes meditation on Vishnu and not meditation on the void. The so-called yogis who meditate on something which is not the Vishnu form simply waste their time in a vain search after some phantasmagoria. We have to be Krishna conscious devoted. We have to be Krishna conscious devoted to the personality of Godhead. This is the aim of the real yoga.
So we see that the Krishna consciousness process, it's a practical application of, or it's a practical engagement of the senses in the Lord's service. So rightly, Krishna consciousness can be called transcendental sense gratification or real sense gratification. And desires. So everything at our disposal is engaged in the Lord's service, because all of these faculties which we have are all been more or less lent to us. And so we see some nice quotes that some of our acharyas are stating. Srila Baladev Vidyabhushana. So he is stating that the senses can be completely controlled only by the strength of devotional service to Krishna. So as much as we're engaged in Krishna service, then our senses are controlled. And there's a verse where Prabhupada is mentioning that it was text 58. In the purport to text 58, Prabhupada is describing that we have to draw Krishna describes, we have to draw the senses within, just like the tortoise draws his limbs within. And in the purport to that verse, Prabhupada describes that the senses are like venomous serpents. They want to act very loosely without restriction. The yogi or the devotee must be very strong to control the serpents, like a snake charmer. And continues, it says, there are many injunctions in the revealed scriptures. Some of them are do nots and some of them are do's. Unless one is able to follow the do's and the do nots, restricting oneself from sense enjoyment, it is not possible to be firmly fixed in Krishna consciousness. So what's interesting is that when we engage the senses, which are normally like venomous snakes, in the Lord's service, then the fangs are severed, or the fangs are rendered useless. And the snake is more or less just like a harmless, a harmless creature. Without his fangs, what is he going to do? Give a small nibble, So the yogi, as exemplified by King Ambarish, uses everything at his disposal in the Lord's service. And that science is actually taught by the spiritual master. And it is a 2-track process. One is the Pancharatraki Vidhi, which is mostly having to do with the Lord in his deity form in the temple, and cleanliness, regulation, things of that nature, which have to do with the temple worship. And then the other side is hearing and preaching about Krishna, which is called the Bhagavat Vidhi. And using these two processes, we learn from the spiritual master how to render the normally venomous, dangerous snakes of the senses harmless. And then the devotee is not actually, having been 10% or 100% engaged in the Lord's service, such service or such engagement of the senses with the sense objects is no longer a detriment or a source of bondage, but it becomes the source of liberation for the devotee and the source of purification.
Example was given a thorn. If someone has a thorn stuck in his body somewhere, then the solution is to take another thorn and pry it out. So same thing. If one eats too much milk products, indulges in too much milk, with the medicinal aspect, cures the disease. So we're active in the material world, we're getting in trouble. The senses are the problem. But when the senses And the mind is the king of the senses. When the mind is engaged in Krishna, Savayamana Krishna Padavinde, then all the other senses, they're controlled. So, or sometimes it's said that the tongue is the most voracious sense. There's different competition. The tongue is very voracious, always wants to taste something attractive. But if one can control the tongue, then he can control the mind, he can control the belly, genitals, everything can be controlled. Atak Sri Krishna Namadi Nabhave Gramindriyai Sevan Mukhi Jivados Svayame Pasparachata. Beginning with the tongue. So we have to bring the senses under control. We have prasadam. Krishna has kindly given us this transcendental tasty foodstuffs that he has eaten. Because he has eaten it, it has become so wonderfully tasteful. Otherwise, it's not possible to explain how someone just by taking prasadam can give up interest in the material world. It doesn't make any sense. But prasadam is not ordinary, it's not ordinary food. It may look like ordinary food, but actually it's offered to the Lord, and Krishna accepts it. And when he accepts it, it becomes transcendental. Or even drama. We're captivated by drama. We're the Hollywood people. We were raised in Hollywood mood. So how do we get free from that? Well, we can drown ourselves in the drama of all the pastimes of Krishna. And Krishna's pastimes are unlimited. Ananta. Unlimited. He has so many incarnations, unlimited incarnations. They each have their dramas. And we're just getting the Bhagavatam on this planet, 60 volumes, was it 12 cantos, 60 volumes. But in the heavenly planets, thousands of volumes of pastimes of the Lord that one can drown himself in and get absorbed in. And they're more sweet than the sweetest things we have in our musicals or cartoons or whatever. And they're more exciting and adventuresome. We have Mahabharata, we have Ramayana, so many in Krishna's pastimes, how he kidnaps Rukmini. She was just about to be married to Shishupal. She didn't want to marry Shishupal. She wrote a letter to Krishna, and Krishna got the letter, and she said, you have to come right away. The wedding ceremony is scheduled for tomorrow. Please come, don't waste time. He immediately came. Anyway, it's a whole drama. And Ramayana, such a drama. The Lord's wife is kidnapped by the demon Ravana, and they have to find Sita, and they have to. So Hanuman, all these things are dramas, and we can get absorbed in them, and they're not material. If you dream of Ramayana, it'll be good for you. It'll be very nice if you dream of Ramayana, if you dream of Mahabharata or Krishna's pastimes. And then there's also the devotees that are assisting Krishna. Their pastimes are also transcendental. So if you dream of Arjuna kidnapping Subhadra, that's also transcendental, because Krishna's friend is Arjuna, his sister is Subhadra. Balaram wanted his sister, he was the older brother, so he decided, my sister's going to marry Duryodhana, he's my student. And Krishna told Arjuna, we don't want that. So you kidnap her first. So they made a whole arrangement, and Arjuna dressed up like a sannyasi. And so much so, he was so well dressed up and so hidden, even Balaram couldn't tell who he was. And they were feeding him, and he was looking at Subhadra, and Subhadra was looking at him, and they fell in love. And everyone was wondering what's going on here with the sannyasi and Subhadra. But anyway, then the sannyasi put on his chariot and drove off. And when the other Kshatriyas found out, they thought, how is this possible that he, anyway, they went after him. But actually, Balaram was going to kill Arjuna. He was so angry that he had made this plan, and this Arjuna didn't respect it. But Krishna fell at his feet. Krishna fell down on the ground and at the feet of Balaram and said, please, please don't do that. This is a great honor for our dynasty to now be connected with the glorious Kuru dynasty. So this is a wonderful opportunity. Who could be a greater husband for our sister than Arjuna, the great archer? Dhananjaya has all these fame, virtuous. So Balaram was pacified and they had a big wedding ceremony. It was wonderful. So this is better than watching The Edge of Night or Dr. such and such show or this show or that show or horror shows. If you want horror shows, we've got the drama of Prahlad and Hiranyakashipu and the horrible things he tried to do to his son, but Krishna protected him in every case. So this is good, clean fun. Chanting at night instead of doing other things that are detrimental to the body and everyone else's body and mind. Chanting is nice, getting up early to bed, early to rise, makes a man healthy, wealthy, wise. This is an American saying. So all these things are good for us, and then no one can find any fault. I have to admit that, well, the vegetarian lifestyle is certainly more healthy, it's certainly more kind to the animals. And they're living so simply, they don't require all these material things. So this is Krishna consciousness, it's practical. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
Hare Krishna, thank you for a nice class, Maharaj and Prabhu. Oftentimes in the Bhagavad Gita, we hear that it's not recommended to go to heavenly planets, that they're a distraction on the path towards bhakti and serving Krishna. And that at the same time, there's a couple of apparently contradictory situations, like, as you mentioned, Maharaj, in the heavenly planets, there's more access to the path, more pastimes, and one could say that being in the mode of goodness is more conducive towards becoming a devotee or being Krishna conscious. So could you maybe clarify that?
Well, yes, there are other opportunities, longer lifespan, but the allurements are so unbelievably attractive. It'll be very difficult for anybody to withstand them and say, no, I'm just going to chant Hare Krishna. And very difficult. So you can try, but Indra had a difficult time. All the demigods, they have a difficult time controlling their senses. So why are the demigods standing in line to take birth in Brahma in Bharatvarsha? Because in Bharatvarsha, one lifetime, if you practice devotional service, you can go back to Godhead. So they think, well, what do I want to live for thousands of years up here and forget Krishna and have to come back to the material world again? I don't know. Better just go down to Bharatvarsha, chant Hare Krishna one lifetime, join ISKCON, and go back to Godhead. You can take a chance if you like. Go to heaven. That's the booby prize. As if you didn't quite understand what, you still think that enjoying the apsaras is going to make you completely happy. You'll see, it doesn't work. We've already done it. Already been there and done that. Been up and down, zero so many times. How many times do we keep trying? This time I'll make it. this time I'll be able to enjoy my senses to the fullest extent. Doesn't work like that. This place is doomed. Krishna calls it Abrahma Bhuvana Loka Punar Arjuna Amo Pecha Takonte Punar Vijayana Vijay. Repeated birth and death take place. Place of misery when repeated birth and death. So it's not recommended. Why would Krishna not want us to be happy? He knows that's not real happiness. That's so-called, that's illusory happiness. Real happiness means to have a pure consciousness just to please Krishna. Anything other than pleasing Krishna is displeasing to Krishna because it's foreign, it's dirty. Anything that we want, any desires we have, or any endeavors we try to take up that are not pleasing to Krishna are contaminating. That doesn't do any good for anyone.
So, why do you feel the need to overeat or oversleep?
Well, there's one verse where Krishna describes, and he's going to describe it here. He says, Kama Esha Krodha Esha Rajogunam Samudbhava Mahashino Mahapapma Vidhenam Ihavaidanam. That Arjuna asked Krishna, why are we impelled to sinful acts even against our own will? And Krishna describes it is lust only, Arjuna, which is later transformed into wrath and is born out of a mode of passion. It's the greatest enemy of the whole world. And so it's lust. As Maharaj actually was commenting on that before, that, this lust is the major issue, like that starts the whole downfall, like we read in text 62 and 63, like when we become lusty, then we become angry and delusion arises, and then we become forgetful like that. So we forget that the last time I did this, actually, it wasn't that great. Then we do it again.
Also, in regards to the heavenly planets, it seems Krishna would recommend to Arjuna early on fight for the sake of fighting, because that would ensure his elevation to heavenly planets. So it seems like it would be best. I mean, one might argue that would he even offer that option, I guess.
Couldn't hear that last part there.
Oh, I'm trying to understand, like, why does Krishna also offer, like, apparently lower options to Arjuna in the early parts of the Bhagavad Gita, if he eventually is going to come to the conclusion of telling him it's not good to go to the higher planets? But earlier on, he says that he should fight for the sake of fighting, and that's going to elevate him to the heavenly planets.
If that's what you're thinking, Arjuna, if you're thinking you're going to do this, so you don't want to fight because you don't want to engage in sinful activities, and you want to be able to go to heaven, you don't want to have to suffer sinful. That's what he was talking about. Arjuna was bringing up all these points. Our spoils will be tainted with blood if we fight against these of our relatives, and when the women are not protected, then they fall down into illicit connection, makes bad progeny, will be suffering. He's talking about sinful reactions for himself. So Krishna pointed out, all right, if you're talking about sinful reactions, And if you don't fight, that's more sinful for a Kshatriya. To run away from your service, to give up your sacred duty at the time when it's most needed, that's really bad. And you'll be considered a fallen coward. Your name will be shunned. No one will think you were glorious and compassionate. They'll just think you were a coward. And for one who is honored, dishonor is worse than death for you. And then he said, he called him Konteya. Konteya, Kunti is Arjuna's mother, but Kunti is Krishna's aunt. So Krishna didn't want to be connected. You're my cousin brother, and you're going to spoil the whole family name by not fighting. No Kshatriya's ever even thought of doing what you're talking about doing. So he's pointing out his Kshatriya duties. And later on, they'll say, but whether you feel you're a Kshatriya or whatever you are, just give it all up and surrender to me. That's the highest principle. It's the same thing. It says he's using Arjuna as the example for others. Arjuna was already a great devotee of Krishna. He didn't really need to know all this because he knew it. But Krishna put him in apparent ignorance. And so he could give this wonderful discussion. We need to find this out. That even if we do our duty in the Varnashram system, even if we're not successful, so-called successful, in winning on earth, and we go to heaven. So that's, karmis, fruit workers like to hear that. They'll do their duty.
Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. All glories to this humble devotee.